Number 6, the Honourable David Parker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for ACC. What is the proposed increase in ACC levy fees for a car, and how much would it have been if the date for full funding of the motor vehicle account is not extended?
Mr Speaker, Dr. Smith.
The increase proposed by the ACC board for the average motor vehicle is $130.28. But with the government's amendments to the scheme, including pushing out the full funding date, this is reduced to an increase of $30. This is complicated by the fact that the levy may be imposed on the fuel or on the licence fee, that there are different models for extending the full funding date. I note the differences between my own bill and the members that makes a difference, and the fact there is also a relativity adjustment for different types of vehicles.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order, the Honourable David Parker.
That is the second day that I've put that question down on notice. And what it seeks to do is separate out the effect on levies of extending the date for full funding. That's all this question seeks to do. And again, the Minister has not answered the question. He hasn't told us what is the consequence on fees of extending the date for full funding, and that's what the question asked.
I'd dearly like to help the honourable member, but I'm something of a loss, because what I heard the Minister tell the House just now, that under the the status quo, the increase would be I think he said $137 or something, $130, and with the extension that's proposed, that the figure comes down to $30. Now, I don't see what it is the member is seeking me to have me try and achieve, because it. I realise the member has a real interest in this question, and it is on notice, but it seems to me that the Minister has answered. He's given us the two figures depending on those two factors, and the member has more supplementaries. If there's some aspect of it that's escaping my notice, he's got more supplementaries to drill down into that.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order.
I seek leave to table an extract from the briefing to incoming ministers, which showed that the extension of the full funding date to 2019 would be responsible for $83.70 of the lower increase.
Let me deal with the tabling of this document. Leave has sought to table that briefing to the incoming minister. Is there any objection to that? There is no objection.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, the Honourable David Parker.
Why doesn't the Minister not tell the Prime Minister that the majority of the decrease in increase, the majority of the lower increase in ACC registration and petrol levies is caused by the extension for full funding, because the Prime Minister, in answer to question number 1, said it was only a small part of the solution?
The Honourable Dr. Smith.
Mr Speaker, no, the member is incorrect. It is true that the significant amount of the reduction in the motor vehicle account is from full funding extension, and I have said that quite consistently, and the reason. But the thing that the members opposite do not seem to understand is there actually is no real saving collectively from pushing the full funding date out. The only thing you change is when we pay. That is, if by pushing the full funding date out, you have lower levies in the short term but higher levies in the long term. And what the point this government makes is that if you want real savings, you have to make real savings. And that's what the government's program is about doing.
Michael Woodhouse.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister, why is it government policy for ACC to be fully funded rather than as a pay-as-you-go scheme?
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, the principle of full funding is that ACC should fund the full cost of accidents in the year in which they occur. The first reason for this policy is it puts a proper focus on improving safety. If the costs are pushed out into the never-never, there is never the same incentives for reducing accidents. The second reason is the incentives it applies to governments and scheme managers. It is easy to promise extra entitlements when another government in future has to do the paying. Full funding puts a better focus on the trade-offs between the entitlements and the actual cost the levy pays.
Supplementary.
David Parker.
Does the Minister agree with John Key's statement last week that an, I quote, honest conversation, end quote, is needed with New Zealanders about how to balance levies and the scope of cover? And if so, how can it be honest for his government to cut ACC cover before that conversation takes place?
Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, I think it is important for us to have an open discussion about the trade-offs between higher levies. What the government and the country cannot have is the continuous argument from members opposite that they can have a whole lot of entitlements but nobody has to pay for them. That is irrational.
Michael Woodhouse.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. What changes are the government proposing in response to the ministerial inquiry into ACC's blowouts that concluded there was a breach by the previous Labor government of the Public Finance Act in the 2008 pre-election fiscal update over ACC's finances?
Mr Speaker,
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, the government is making two important changes. First, new provisions in our amendment bill will require the tabling of an actual report into ACC's financial situation. I note that actuaries back in 2006 expressed concern when the ACC board made some quite bold assertions about ongoing investment returns, but they never made it into the annual reports that ACC tabled in Parliament. This change will ensure that that does not occur again. The second change we are making is around the timing of the budgetary process for the funding required for the non-earners account, where we are shifting it to better fit into the overall budgetary process so that those errors are not repeated.
The Honourable David Parker.
Why has the government ignored Labor's offer to vote to extend the date for full funding, which would take substantial pressure off levy increases, while John Key's honest conversation takes place? And doesn't his decision to proceed with cuts in ACC cover and investigations of privatisation show this was the real agenda all along?
No, Mr Speaker. Again, I would make the point that Labor cannot continue the myth of being able to continuously extend the ACC scheme without it costing anybody anything. We do need to have a conversation around the extensions, and I simply challenge the member. Please explain, why did you make a whole lot of extensions to the scheme after ACC returned an annual report of a $2.4 billion loss? It requires an explanation.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, the Honourable David Parker.
How does the Minister reconcile his assurance last week that the legislative changes in his draft bill would provide a, quotes, one-off substantive fix and that, quotes, only tinkering, close quotes, would be required in the future, with the secret plans leaked to the media in the weekend to charge claimants $100 per injury and to reduce income compensation from 80% to 60% of earnings?
Mr Speaker, there's nothing secret. What happened was that myself and the board asked ACC officials to explore savings options. Some of those savings options were accepted and included in the bill. Some of them were rejected. I think that's a perfectly rational process for a government that is trying to fix ACC from very difficult financial problems.
Question number 7, Chester Borrows.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Justice and asks, what progress has been made on the government's plan to hold a referendum on the electoral system as set out in National's election policy?
The Honourable Simon Power.
Mr Speaker, today I have announced on behalf of the government that a referendum will be held in conjunction with the 2011 general election